Good. Wonderful. More drama and controversy coming out from Arrowhead and people talking about it. The weird thing is, like, last time Arrowhead gave the community exactly what they wanted with the Sony controversy, it didn't seem to actually matter. So, yeah. Which we're going to cover here in a second. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what it means, because it could be good or bad. The first bad thing already being they're talking about changing the chargers, which probably just means they're going to be nerfed again. Last time chargers were changed for the betterment of Reddit, it meant they got nerfed. In that regard, they changed basically so you could headshot them and one-shot them, basically. It went from a relatively two-shot kill to a one-shot kill, which is usually the difference between the charger making 2 passes and making 1 pass, which obviously drastically reduces the difficulty. Sometimes they won't even make a pass on you now. So, yeah, or even get near you with the one-shot chargers. So then they added the superchargers, which obviously people are back to the same bitching about them working, because they actually have to play against them. They don't, though. They can play on lower difficulty. This game has 10 difficulties in it now, and only difficulty that Reddit can play on is Diff 10. I can't play any higher than Diff 10. Reddit can't drop the difficulty for some reason, and I can't increase the difficulty because there isn't more difficulties. So, what exactly is going on here? Like, we're up against a wall in terms of difficulty, and the last 2 months prior to the patch were absolute fucking easy mode. The game was easy divers. It was. You could just objectively, observably notice this based on the number of lives that are left when people extract, the amount of map that's cleared, and the amount of time that's left at the most basic level, guys. And oftentimes, in the case of bugs, it was 3 reinforcements missing, half the time left, maybe a quarter of the time left, a third of the time left, and whole map clear. And that means the game's easy mode. No one's dying. And it doesn't need to be super gimmicky deaths, it just needs to be harder difficulty, right? And I'm not for cheese, and I bitch about cheese when I see it. Cheese deaths, which does exist in the game, but that's not what I'm looking for at all. That's not what I'm intending to look for. Weirdly enough, I've had all sorts of weird arguments with people on social media. And there's one guy that I was arguing with that wants fair difficulty, but he doesn't want anything nerfed. And that is contradictory, because as it turns out, when something's OP, it makes the game easy, which means it then needs to be nerfed, or the game is easy. It makes the game much easier. So, how do you have fair difficulty, and you don't nerf any of the OP stuff in the game? It's a good question, guys. That's a really, really good question. It's hypocritical and contradictory, but that's the kind of shit that you're fighting against, is people that legit don't think of what they're saying. And then the guy was arguing with me that I'm putting words in his mouth by saying that, but he just didn't actually think of what he was saying. Yeah, just fucking weird shit, guys. It's Reddit difficulty now. It used to be streamer diff when the game first started, which I complained about. And then we got Reddit diff, which is just Reddit difficulty. The game's easy for everyone else. And now it looks like they might be doing the same again. Whether or not that turns out to be the case, they said it's in the next 60 days. We'll just cover this right now. Anyways, that's what I planned on talking about at the beginning of the stream. Pop up it's not really patch notes, but statement from Shams. So more elaboration from Shams. This is probably why Piltz kind of I don't think he stepped down, he stepped to the side. It is probably because he didn't want to do stuff like this. Actually, this isn't from Shams, this is from Michael E. Michael. It sounds like a Lars. That's not a very Swedish name if I've ever seen one. Michael? He could be from the US. He's a undercover agent in Sweden, now at Arrowhead. So it's basically a mission statement, which we're going to cover here in a second, which assumedly they're going to more or less abide by. And we're going to discuss this a little bit here. It's not really something where I feel as though it might not be the end of all times. I don't want to perpetuate this as being as like Reddit completely won and they're going to nerf the game to the ground. However, it very much seems like they might be doing that. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. Reddit doesn't know what the fuck it wants. It wants something that's good, but it doesn't know what good is and assumes easy is good because win equals good. We talked about this before. The simplistic relationships in a lot of people's minds where they don't think things out and they have like an input-output system in terms of thought, where win equals fun, therefore more win equals more fun. But that's not the way it works, because there's a lot of elements that go on into the winning element to make it fun. Otherwise it feels fruitless, and you don't get any enjoyment out of it. It doesn't matter how often you're winning. There's no serotonin or dopamine, because they don't actually realize there's a lot of things that go into this moment that makes it fun when you do win, right? They're just like, win equals good. Therefore, more win equal good. Therefore, let me win more equal more good. You know, and that's not true at all. It's not remotely fucking true. I'm gonna grab my coffee, guys. We'll get into this in a second. Alright, guys. Let's see. So, this is obviously a complex topic matter, guys. And as such, it's not something where there's going to be a clear-cut answer. And really depends on what this actually means, because it's open to interpretation, a lot of the topic matter here.
Fellow Helldivers, I want to directly address the feedback you've raised about the escalation of freedom update. We've spent the last week listening to feedback, reflecting about the path ahead for Helldivers 2 and how we want to continue developing the game. In short, we didn't hit our target with the latest update. Some things we just didn't get right, and other more fundamental inconsistencies in our approach to game balance and game direction. All of that is on us, and we are going to own that. As many of you have pointed out, and we agree, what matters most now is action, not talk.
That's what I legit said.
Here's what we intend to do in the upcoming updates.
That's legit what I said on my stream. People can say a lot of things, and a lot, Shams, for instance, Shams' job is legit to be kind of a not a narrator, but a negotiator between two parties, right? He's there to accept blame as well as, accolades at the same time, and try and weigh and balance the scales, more or less. I don't know exactly what Shams does, but I thought he was going to be a business guy, but I guess not. But either way, what matters is actually what they're going to do with the game. They can say a lot of different things, but really what matters is what pops out in the patch notes later down the road. That being said, we talked about the Incinerator prior to it being nerfed, and what I mentioned about it, this is once again the 2 months after Meridia, prior to the patch, where it was boring as fuck, was we talked about the prevalence of the Incinerator and how many people were using it, and I lamented a couple different times about what happens if they just turned it off for a week and a half to 2 weeks. And vaulting it, basically, is what it comes down to. And the reasoning and the rationale for that is because a lot of people seem to think that the Incinerator is the only weapon that works against bugs, when it's not. There's a lot of viable weapons against bugs. I use them all the time. But as far as that goes, a lot of people thought only the Incinerator was good, which is not true, right? It wasn't true at all. But, yeah. But there's a lot of people that were going around on social media and saying that they wish they had more than one weapon, but they did actually have more than one weapon, but they weren't also, trying it. As it turns out, you didn't actually need it, and that's putting aside the fact that we also discovered is multi-tiered problem. Well, further we discovered upon patch notes was people seem to think that they're doing really good with Incinerator when they pop a kill streak. But kill streaks are generally not misconstrued, but generally generated based on last hitting, and obviously a dot weapon's going to be really good at that. It's not about overall damage, rather it's about the last damage that ticks the killing blow, that then gives you +1 to your kill streak. So you can have multiple people contributing, especially damage to, let's say, a bug hole, and if you get the last hit because they're already hurt, you're going to pop a kill streak, and it really doesn't matter whether or not that's, you're the sole cause of it, you're going to pop a kill streak. We talked a little bit about redoing stats and making it so that Helldivers have more information that is available to them at... Also, something else that's kind of interesting here. More information that's then available to them at the end of the game so they can better parse what they did, their performance, their personal performance as well as their team performance at the end of the match, and figure out what exactly is going on in it. Very important, really, for any game nowadays, is good stats. Helldivers 2 does not have good stats. It has basically one stat that matters, which is kills, and that's just killing blows. So killing blows or assists, I don't know which it is. I've not taken time to test it. You can figure it out. Either way, at the end here, we redid and came up with a list of things that I thought would actually be very useful. Kills, medium kills, large kills, total damage done, primary damage done, which is a segmentation or a segment of total damage done, which is the amount of damage you've done with your primary weapon. So you can figure out exactly what you're doing with your weapon. And even a percentage would be more accurate because you want to figure out exactly how much of your total damage you're doing through your primary or maybe compared to your peers in the same mission. Either way, both these are really important stats. They're currently missing. You need to figure out who's damage dealers in the game. Whether or not the engine can even do this, I don't fucking know. Most modern engines can do it. This is not a modern engine, so who knows? Maybe it shits itself when this happens. But objectives attended, objectives soloed, samples collected, mission time, and then there's some things that should be kept, which is deaths, accidentals, and distance traveled. All really important, mainly for parsing the viability, your personal performance, the viability of certain things in the dive itself, which can be objectively looked at without actually relying on subjective observation. Very important. In most games, this is very important. This is why stats are in most games, right? Even if you don't understand stats, this is why they're in most games. But this is actually really important. The kind of takeaway from this, though, was the fact that people were using Incinerator and thinking they're doing a lot better than they were doing with other weapons. The Incinerator, in my personal opinion, which I've used a decent chunk, was I thought it was just above average. I don't think it is super amazing, and if you don't paint with it, aka just spreading the dot around to multiple targets to get it rolling to multiple targets, like multi-dotting, then you're using it wrong, and it's not better than the breaker. You should be taking the breaker if you're using it for single target DPS. There's not really any reason to take the Incinerator without painting with it. It's pointless. But a lot of people actually do just paint, or not paint with it, they try to single target DPS. They won't paint at all. And you can see that by basically on kill cams when you're dead, just watching people and how they play, or watching your peers, or watching stuff on Reddit. There's a lot of ways to see it, and it's just not everyone else is doing that. You have to paint with it. But anyways, in the case of the Incinerator, I didn't think they needed to nerf it. And they didn't need to get it out of, permanently get out of rotation. They just had to temporarily remove it from rotation so people would try other things and, figure out if something else is working. They could set it to maintenance. They could have reduced the dot damage to 1 and see if people even noticed. If they want to be scummy, that is. They could say they're temporary vaulting stuff to gather statistics, which also would actually just be true and possibly be understandable. There's a lot of ways they could approach the topic matter without nerfing the Incinerator. The Incinerator, as it stands right now, is not even nerfed. It has a lower quality of life, which is you have to find ammo on occasion. I've used it post-patch. It doesn't do less damage. You just occasionally have to find ammo. That's not actually that big of a deal. It's actually not a big nerf, but people don't see it that way. They just cry. So they see words, they cry, and negative, cry. That's basically, once again, a very simple relationship. Negative words, cry. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It's not even about understanding it or what's going on with it or the viability of the weapon currently after the nerf. It's just they see one relationship and they cry. So, yeah. But like I said, there's multiple ways they could have approached the topic matter and made it more nuanced in a way that wasn't like the community wouldn't have the same amount of outcry to it. So, it would have been better off. But they didn't do that. Yeah. game balance and game direction. So we're going to help all these actually, by the way, almost all these points here are actually really important. So next 60 days, so they set a time limit for themselves, which is going to be hopefully after their team gets back, because apparently some people are still out. Which is, yeah, like I said, this is kind of weird. The Swedish summer came at like their vacation time came at a really, really bad time for this game. And I'm not saying they shouldn't take their paid time off, because they should take their paid time off. They deserve it. But they could have waited till maybe the end of the year and did it around Christmas or something, you know? There's a lot more. It was kind of during this really weird kind of point in this game where people, like, they needed to try and they just didn't. You know, obviously, I don't think they can just tell them not to take the paid... I mean, maybe they could. Just tell them not to take paid time off till later. But, you know, like, if they could have done it later in the year, it would have been much better off. Because they did the Sony controversy, slowed down development, and then development basically just ceased in July when they went on vacation. So, yeah, it was like they did... you know, Sony controversy wasn't something they could have even... predicted. I didn't predict it. There's no way that could have, like, anyone could have figured that out. But after that was basically everything they did themselves, and it didn't help their position. But anyways, they set 60 days here, which is, you know, good to have some sort of time limit, even if it's arbitrary, right? Let's see.
Continue to re-examine our approach to balance.
Yep.
Our intention is that balance should be fun, not balanced, for the sake of balance.
Well, I disagree about this, guys. Fun, in the case of Reddit, how we just talked about a simplistic relationship, is fun equal win. Overpowered equal win equals fun equals good, right? But it doesn't. There's a lot more nuance. If you have OP weapons that are broken, it makes the game easy equals win, but you find out that easy mode actually isn't fun. You can cheat in a lot of games. It doesn't make the games fun anymore. But we've kind of reached the point nowadays where people cheat and they think that's actually their skill or it's somehow enjoyable. I don't actually know how that works, but for some people they're so deluded they think cheating actually makes games fun. In their mind, it actually makes games fun. But in this case, they're getting legitimate cheats, which is just making the game easier, therefore more fun. It doesn't necessarily need to be that way. You can definitely have fun while not winning, but for a lot of people, it is almost a direct relationship between win equal fun. And in the case here, we are probably going to see a case where they just leave stuff broken that is OP as shit. Incendiary Breaker, once again, did not need to be nerfed. Flamethrower, which we're going to talk about in a sec, did not need to be nerfed, and that probably was a bug that they fixed, which we're going to get to here in a second. Actually, I think... Yeah, no. So, Flamethrower, guys, as we talked about multiple times after the patches, I believe they actually made it so... it was fixing a bug. My personal opinion was that the flamethrower was doing damage through the leg unintentionally, and the armor was not stopping it. It should actually stop it, but it didn't. The projectiles would actually go through the leg and harm the insides of the leg without actually them intentionally wanting to do that. And yeah, whether or not that's true or not, I don't actually know, because it didn't say. Actually, I think it is. Oh, right here. It's actually the next line. Yeah, right here.
P-date how the fire damage mechanic works to tweak how the flamethrower serves as a close-range support weapon. A quick straight revert won't work, as it would break other things.
So I think I'm pretty sure, this is more credence, by the way, to me being right, that I thought it was a bug. So what happens is, even if, when they release the new flamethrowers, the primary and the secondary, so a pistol, it could still kill a charger. Now imagine if you have the same time to kill with a smaller flamethrower. If you have a pistol and you can kill a charger in half a meg, wouldn't that be broken? Yes, it would. I don't know why they didn't say it's a bug, because I'm pretty sure it's a bug. Maybe they didn't want more heat for saying it's a bug, but I'm pretty sure it was actually a bug. That being said, there's other ways that they could have changed this while still fixing it, which they could have given it an armor removal. So just like with other weapons, when you pop the leg armor off, you could do the same thing with the flamethrower. You do so much damage to it, pops the leg armor off. They could have done that, because otherwise it drastically alters the way that the game functions, right? It drastically alters charger gameplay. If the charger goes like this, past you, and then you have to wait for it to turn around to come back, that's 2 charge passes, right? In the case of the, EAT, recoilless or whatever, they changed the normal charger, so when it charges at you, you can pop the head and it's dead. It doesn't even make 1 pass at you. So, if it has to pass and you have to shoot the ass, it has to do at least 1 pass, right? But if you have multiple chargers, hitting you from multiple angles, it's very difficult for you to actually hit the hit the ass on the first charger when you have two other chargers charging you or supporting enemies charging you while you're trying to DPS down that little 3-second window when it turns around, 4-second window when it turns around. DPS down the charger before it turns around. It is very, very difficult to do that. It's one of the problems with the autocannon as well. It's one of the big downsides to the autocannon is you can deal with one charger, but you deal with three, it becomes very difficult. Now, the charger comes at you, but you can shoot the leg and kill it, even if it takes a little bit. That means, well, the charger's aimed at you, which is, 80%, 90% of its time is it's going to be aimed at you. You can hit the armor from the front, which will then deplete it, and then you can kill it. It's actually faster. The time to kill is lower, even though it's a more, maybe complicated process, right? But, what they did is they removed the ability to shoot it from the front and then made it so you can only shoot it from the rear, but that has a lot of downsides and drastically raises the difficulty of dealing with chargers. So they didn't actually think about what happens when they have to kill the charger later on. There's still a way to kill it, which is shooting the pooper, but you're not going to always have stun grenades. It's not always going to be turned around. It's not always going to be alone. There's a lot of people who seem to think like you live in a vacuum where you're 1v1ing creeps, and that's not true at all, right? So it pissed off a lot of people because they can no longer actually use a flamethrower to deal with the charger from the front anymore. And even if you could cook it underneath, that'd still be fine. If there's a way to deal with the charger without just shooting the pooper. But there wasn't. So they never actually, even though they fixed the bug, which was probably that it was shooting through the armor, so the pistol no longer just insta-kills the charger, which is my guess is what was happening. The pistol no longer insta-kills the charger. They never added another way to address frontal attack on the charger with the flamethrowers, which is what people have been able to do now. And I wasn't totally against that because flamethrowers still have a lot of downsides to them. And we still need to address the Warbond primaries in the Better Divers Guide, because I have actually a couple ideas on how they can make the primary and the secondary actually work well without just completely retooling the weapons and making them different. There's a lot of inherited downsides from the stratagem that they don't actually need because they're lesser damage dealing weapons. It's not really part of them, and they should be more mobile kits, right? Either way, this is verbatim. This didn't need to happen, and my guess is they didn't think things through. They fixed a bug, and then they didn't think things through. So,
Rework gameplay to prevent excessive ragdolling.
Ragdolls aren't fun. We've died to them. They kill you. It's when it happens excessively, but that being said, I don't think ragdolls usually happen excessively. The not downside, the kicker to that, though, is the bots, which after Meridia, on the other hand, the bots, they toned up the concussive damage on the bots, and they started ragdolling you a lot fucking more. You start just bouncing around constantly, right? Bugs, on the other hand, you can definitely avoid ragdolling, and I wouldn't say any of the ragdolling on bugs is excessive. On bots, on the other hand, assuming they're the same as they were 2 weeks ago, if you get hit by missiles, you just fly all over the place. Half the battle is avoiding missiles in line of sight so you don't just get chucked around, because that'll kill you. Either getting chucked around or aim punched. We talked about this quite a bit after Meridia happened, and it's one of the reasons that I find bots unfun, which other people are also finding is unfun, right? But that being said, having some ragdolling I think is actually good, and there's been a lot of cases where ragdolling's been a lot worse. As we talked about last night, there was a time in which the chargers, for about maybe a couple days, way back in like the first month or two after release, there was a case where the chargers would hit you and literally just pile drive you into a rock, and you just go boop, and you die. That was it. You literally just hit a rock and die. I mean, it was relatively realistic because your spine would be broken, you'd be dead. But realism is not a balancing mechanic. Regardless of what Reddit says for justification, you can use realism as inspiration, but at the end of the day, for obvious reasons, realism is not fun. Realism is not fun, right? Yeah. But anyways, excessive ragdolling, I see some people complaining about this. People legit just complain about anything that kills them. So it's not even necessarily that it kills them. In some cases it will kill them, but a lot of it's actually avoiding in the first place. Good evening, Psycho. My YouTube video is sideways, as it turns out. I have two streams that run simultaneously on YouTube. One is my landscape, and one is my mobile stream. And the mobile stream is sideways, as it turns out. And for some reason, YouTube recommended you my mobile stream instead of my normal stream. I have both of them running at the same time, though. Yeah, I don't know why. So I don't know why YouTube recommended it to you, but it did, and I have both, so you can watch either of them depending on what you choose. If you're a mobile user, you turn off landscape, you just turn your phone sideways. It really depends. It's YouTube's algorithm. It's a black box, and I don't know exactly how it works, but it decided you wanted to watch my sideways stream, so. Yeah, well, good. You actually found my Twitch stream somehow from YouTube, so that's always good, right? Entirely intentional, though. But anyways, ragdolling, guys, it sucks, but like total deaths to ragdolling for me, I would say is actually relatively minimal. Although I generally die very minimally. Last night, I think my teammates killed me more than anything else in the game. So, there's like last night I 100% got shot in the face by like someone with an incendiary breaker while trying to avoid him, and all he needed to do was not shoot me. And instead of shooting anything else around me, he plugged me in the face and I died. Yeah, like literally kited around like the world's biggest herd of Zerg everywhere, and then it's just a teammate that tries to help that kills you. So, okay, you're gonna put your laptop on your side. See, it works fine. It works fine. Who cares about having a 16:9 screen? It's actually a 9:16 screen, isn't it? I just turned it sideways. Yeah, with a lot of black bars. Anyways, your combat more engaged. Rethink our okay.
Rethink our design approach to primary weapons and create a plan for making combat more engaging.
So, do you know what we talked about, guys? Roughly a week ago, when I added, which I put off for months, by the way, even after I started the Better Divers guide. You know what we put off for basically a month, even though I talked about it extensively when the game first came out, and you can find in my earlier patch video notes. Gun differentiation. How to make primaries not only different from each other, but fun to use, which is going to involve a complete overhaul of their primary system, because as it turns out right now, their guns are stat sticks. Almost all the guns are stat sticks. They're very much just DPS sticks. That's it. They're like Destiny. It all comes down to the laser rifle, which is just whatever does the most damage. It doesn't matter what it looks like, or sounds like, or feels like. It's just whatever, well, within reason. We're not talking about feedback. We're talking about aesthetic. It doesn't even matter what it is. It rather depends on what does the most DPS. The guns in Helldivers 2 are pretty much just stat sticks. As it turns out, they have to retool them and put them into pros and cons categories and categorize them, which is already partially done, into how they function. The SMGs, the assault rifles, the DMRs, the shotguns are all very much alike, even though the shotguns fire pellets. They don't really have damage fall off. The most basic level, which we talked about here in the Better Divers Guide, most basic level that involves categorizing them in terms of what effective range. That will mean some guns are going to get nerfed like shotguns that are good at all ranges, but it also means assault rifles will be better at long or medium-ish ranges and kind of all around, and DMRs will be better at longer ranges. It's when they get into their cons category, like let's say a DMR, is really good, what medium long range, but then when they get within short medium range, you're going to get absolutely fucked. That's just the way it's going to be, and you're going to have to switch to a secondary, right? And you're going to have to actually fill in the gaps, which is going to piss some people off. And the worst case scenario is having no gun differentiation, which is what's currently happening, and just having a laser rifle. In this document, and probably one of the first cases where I started talking about this is Fortnite, where everyone wanted guns to be laser rifles. It doesn't matter if it's an SMG, assault rifle, DMR. They want it to be the best weapon, no recoil, best DPS, laser rifles the fuck out of anyone. It's also a sniper rifle, and you can use it as an SMG and in close quarters. They want the everything gun that is one gun. The problem with this, despite the fact that it is balanced, because there's nothing else that's better than it, is the fact that all the other guns in the game are worthless. In Fortnite, I don't know what current Fortnite meta is, so this is probably going to be different, but in Fortnite it used to be you had two guns. You had an SMG, you had a shotgun, and you had the laser rifle, and that's it. And through the seasons, the laser rifle, the name changed for it, the gun changed for it, is essentially always the same thing. It's a laser rifle. It doesn't do anything worse. It's just good at everything. And there's always just the everything gun in Helldivers 2, in Fortnite. The problem is that it's not fun. You aren't going to be using this gun and go, wow, I'm actually doing better than this other guy that took the assault rifle because we're now in close quarters. You're just always just using the same guns, more or less. And it comes down to the stat stick of what's actually, what does the most damage in a linear form. And that's it. In the case here, though, there's obviously exceptions that are currently in the game. Explosive weapons being one of them. Elemental weapons, which they could add more of in the future if they want to, and everyone wants to talk about that. Elemental weapons, however, are something that's more specialized. It takes more time, right? After not more time, they have to balance things out better before they start tackling super specialized niche stuff in the game. Even though incendiary weapons are already in the game, something like the incendiary Punisher, I don't remember the name of it, the new pump shotgun. It's essentially just another shotgun, only slightly sets them on fire. It's basically another pump. That's really it for the most part. It doesn't really do anything all that different than the other guns in the game, even though it technically sets them on fire. Although they could potentially change that if they had a morale system to the game, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. Also in the Better Divers Guide here, in which enemies will flee if they're on fire or something like that, where their morale will get broken or it hurts their morale. There's a lot of different cases where you could actually add stuff to the game and actually change how it functions in the game itself, right? With effects that actually happen to enemies or your teammates. Morale affects both enemies and team, depending on if you want to make it cosmetic or actually something that applies buffs and debuffs. There's a lot of opportunity for that. Either way, more advanced weapons are going to be elemental damage. People want it, but what they don't realize is just besides the special effect, it's essentially just a DPS stick. It's just another DPS stick. And you have to get away from it. You have to give weapons their own unique identity. And of course, even within like an SMG category, the SMGs will have to be somehow notably different from each other without just them becoming an assault rifle, right? Which, arguably, there's some of the SMGs that are just assault rifles. They're all stat sticks. This is gonna require a drastic overhaul to the game itself. And this we added on the 9th, 4 days ago. Oh, lo and behold, it is here now. Here every day, guys. They could have hired me. We could have got this done. Shams, we could have got I guess you weren't in charge. You weren't the CEO. Pilts, we could have got this done months ago. We could have got this shit done months ago. And while I'm not going to give Reddit a free pass, because fuck that and easy mode game sucks, there's a lot of ways that you can cater to a lot of different playstyles and make the game a lot of fun, while giving people an engaging experience where they can form an identity and basically sense of efficacy in the game, that they have a feeling that they can control what's happening around them, to a certain extent. You can't give them all the control. Reddit wants all the control. They want the button where they just push. There's legit, if you just look at the social media comments, it's just people just saying, I want a button where I just push it and people die in-game. Where they just push the button and the enemies die. They just push this button. Like, literally, it's watching, like, chimpanzees push the button on the feeder and getting a treat. Like, they're literally just doing this. And, they might think that's what they want, but that's not, they're actually human, as it turns out. That's not actually what they want. They pretend they want that, but they don't actually want that. It's just going to take... part of the job as, their developers is actually making something that people don't even know they want, but actually turns out to be really good, right? It isn't necessarily just giving them what they want, even though that's from a consumer standpoint. A lot of people, especially like old school folk or people in service industry, like the customer's always right. They aren't always right, and it's not necessarily something where they're just doing something dumb or making a lot like a. They're just being assholes or something like that, but just even sometimes they don't know what they want, but they want to pretend that they know what they want. All they really know is that they aren't having fun, or it's not as fun as it could be, right? Or they're being completely manipulated by some other outside source, and it's causing things to happen in a really weird way that there's almost no way of stopping because you can't influence them that much. But anyways, putting that aside, combat more engaging, primaries more engaging, guys. Primary weapons, gun differentiation, and you. A primer course. This is actually, I could literally write a book on this, but no one to take it seriously because I can't talk about my 20 years at Arrowhead. So, but here you go. Making the primaries different from each other instead of just stat sticks is basically where they have to go. It's actually kind of blows my mind nowadays, even with hero development in like Overwatch, so not even Arrowhead. At Blizzard with Overwatch, we have Juno now, and if you watch some of the people playing Juno during the beta test for her, she can DPS extremely well, she can heal extremely well, and she's also flanker, which is generally a specialized role, but it's given to this character because she's support. They have everything support, and there's people that are complaining that she's too weak, when you could watch some of the basically top 500 players literally play her and just shit on everyone. And once again, it's not... the kind of people you're talking to, once again, as I mentioned before, if you ask for feedback in the game, you can gather all sorts of analytical data. So when people are offering feedback, if you see they're actually a Diff 5 player, that allows you to kind of gauge their capabilities and whether or not it's going to be an issue at, Diff 9, right? diff 10 now, actually. But either way, like, that's actually really important, is actually know where, to know where these players are coming from. And that's not always the case, right? You don't get analytics on the player base. Analytics in this game, I imagine, are actually pretty sparse. They probably didn't do that. That was probably a backseat option. Analytics should be part of any game, as we talked about with gun stats and just stats in general, endgame stats. Lots of stats, post-game stats are always very important for figuring out performance, or being able to gauge performance or predict performance in general. Very important. Very important. Anyway, yeah, so design approach to primary weapons. Yep, here every day, Arrowhead. I'm here every day. You know, if you want to hire me and stop paying me in 10-cent increments, you know, I have an email box. It's open. But that aside, yes, they have to tackle their primary weapons because they're very boring right now, as people are also lamenting about how boring they are.
Reprioritize bug fixes so that the more immediate gameplay impacting bugs are prioritized.
I thought they've been pretty good about bug fixes. What you'll actually find, despite the fact that they acknowledge bugs in their known bugs part, is people will overemphasize known bugs just because they're there, which is really weird, even if it's not really impacting them. I'd say from a player perspective, although it didn't affect me, I think one of the biggest ones that affected a lot of people were the social bugs, at least from what I heard. And I don't know how prevalent they are because I don't have any friends. That aside, I don't know how prevalent they were on, you know, besides people just having problems with them. I don't know exactly what they need to do or how often they happened. But either way, if you can't play with your friends, you know, when you want to play with your friends, it kind of puts a damper on things, right? As far as gameplay impacting bugs, I'm not exactly sure what falls into this category. Sometimes there's some, but they usually fix them within the week. So that's not really... unless it's something really broken, it's not really something that feels like they're just, you know, ruining it. Exception, I would say, that's been in the game for a while is when you play the nursery and the fucking drill gets stuck in the ground and it literally bricks the mission. That's a big one. And that one was, not that it was super common, but it would happen maybe once every other day, where the drill would get stuck in the ground when it's playing nursery and it would just brick the game. And you'd have basically a soft lock so you can't actually access the drill. That I'm pretty sure they pretty much fixed. I don't think I've seen that since the patch this last week, so I think that's already fixed, but that was in the game for a while. But they're also June. Like I said, July was like probably one of the worst times they could have taken time off, because they're in this like kind of delicate like rebuilding period, and they just fucked off. So, but once again, you can't tell them not to take paid time off, but it kind of feels like maybe they shouldn't have taken paid time off right now. Please just do it in November. Please just do it in November. You know, Christmas? Do they celebrate Christmas there and pray to the Viking gods? I don't know. Maybe. You know, maybe around Christmas, maybe November or something there. Either way, I don't really know what this one is. Improved game performance, frame rate is focus.
Improve game performance, frame rate is a focus.
We actually have a couple notes on here for optimizing, a couple strategies for optimization. We talked about the different ways, the different things in the game that potentially could optimize things. Sim offloading, as well as physics offloading, which the big one was Dagobah biome when they added that with all the tree destruction, if you guys remember that. A lot of people summed it up as rain, which is insane, because I don't think rain ever affected my performance at all. They just don't keep track of their performance. Once again, people just assume that something happens and it's the cause of everything. But as it turns out, basically when you call people are calling stratagems as blowing up the trees would explode into multiple pieces. All those would be physics calculated, and there was a shitload of trees. Not only a shitload of trees, but a lot of destructible. All the trees were destructible, and then they'd fall into a bajillion pieces. And yeah, computers just couldn't handle that. As it turns out, a lot of shitboxes couldn't handle that. My computer even stuttered when it was happening. But there's ways they could have actually helped with that, such as physics offloading to the GPU. There's a lot of interesting things that could have actually, you know, dealt with that. But instead, what they did was made less trees. Trees are less destructible, meaning only some of the trees are destructible, and the trees fell into less pieces. Good evening, Odie. How's it going? Pretty good. So the trees would fall into less pieces. Another one that I suppose is probably a pretty big part of the game right now is pathfinding issues, which you can see where the units get confused and they just stop moving or they get stuck. That's pathfinding. Pathfinding tends to be very, very, very CPU intensive, depending on how many units and how many things they're actually moving around. And it's probably one of their major limiting factors in the game currently is pathfinding. Flow field pathfinding, which we talked about when we added this extensively, Flow field pathfinding came around the guy that was working on Supreme Commander, because the game has thousands of units simultaneously. They came up with flow field pathfinding as a better form of pathfinding as opposed to A-star, which basically every game has. Since then, it's become less of a taboo subject, aka just something black magic, something people don't know about. It's been implemented into other engines such as Unity. They have white papers on it. They have examples. They have media. They have everything you'd actually need to set it up. It could be that because the engine's so fucking weird and ancient and just broken that they can't actually do something like this, but it would probably help with what's going on in the game. That being said, with the performance issues in the game, there's only so much that they're going to be able to do. A big one that they probably could end up doing is going to dedicated servers. And the game right now is not only a peer-to-peer game, it's a peer-to-peer mesh, meaning multiple peer-to-peer compute cluster, meaning you have 4 people connected to the game. Each one of the hosts is hosting units. And I've mentioned before, I think this is a lot to do with why the difficulty is so inconsistent, is because you have 4 computers that are hosting units, all of different CPU levels, right? Most people neglect their CPU. You find out 2 of these guys are on shitboxes with quad-core CPUs. They can't do anything other than host the game. Now you only have 2 players controlling the units and essentially halved your compute cluster capacity, right? So all you have left now is 2 units, or 2 computers. Obviously, if they had a dedicated server, they could have one really, really good CPU for everything, right? That's running in the background. That no one has any, it's on no one's computer. That'd free up a lot of resources. We suggested as an opportunity to that, though, is sim offloading, such as e-cores, which are not utilized at all for games at all. You'd have to make some sort of specialized way of utilizing them, but you could. And almost all 12, basically all 12 to 14,000 series CPUs have e-cores, and they just aren't used. Nothing uses them. Maybe some background tasks in Windows use them. Either way, it's one of the things that they potentially actually could be utilizing, and they currently don't in the game. Rework chargers. This one is the first sign that this might be bad. Chargers were originally nerfed due to Reddit complaining about them. The original charger, you had to pop the leg armor and shoot the armor out. What they did is made it so you could shoot the head. After doing that, it went from having 2 passes usually to killing the unit to having maybe a half a pass where you kill it before it even does a pass on you. So, and sometimes it won't even charge you. If you see it preemptively, you can shoot it before it even gets near you. The chargers went from a mini boss that was very aggressive and something you have to deal with to something that was a non-factor. They then added the superchargers to the game, the Hulk chargers or Behemoth chargers or whatever they're called. They added the superchargers to the game. After adding the superchargers, they became hard once again because you had to either pop the leg armor or double tap it on the face. That meant you actually had to do 2 passes again. Once again, Reddit is now complaining about the Behemoth chargers, the superchargers, and now they're trying to get them nerfed again. So now they're going to rework the chargers, but why? They don't need to. They just can play at a lower difficulty. Once again, like when I talked about the beginning of the stream, guys, where I mentioned that Reddit wants everything just to be OP and everything to be nerfed, it's basically true. Chargers are probably going to end up basically back where they are. There's 10 difficulties in this game, 9 of which people can turn down to. I can't turn up the difficulty past 10. And what we've had, guys, is what we've had in comment sections is legit angry fucks that tell me, just play the fucking random wheel. Just spin the streamer wheel and pick a random loadout. Oh, just don't play with stratagems. That's not remotely fucking fun. You're telling me instead of the game having actual difficulties in the game, I have to make up artificial gimmicks for myself in order to make the game harder. That shouldn't be the case at all. The game's called Helldivers. It's not called Easy Divers. And people want me to basically just gimp myself so I can pretend to have fun. That's not fun. They can turn down the difficulty. There's 9 other difficulties legit in the game that you can scroll through. And one is definitely easy mode, and anyone can fucking do that, so it's never a problem. You can always get down to a difficulty where it's manageable. But they don't want to do that. They want to play on the hardest difficulty, and then get things nerfed on the hardest difficulty, in which I can no longer go higher than. I can't get to higher difficulties. We've talked about challenge progression in the game, guys, and how they potentially could actually increase the difficulty to make it make it so it is much, much higher, and then people will be less likely to complain because they'll be trying to get, like, no one will be able to reach the hardest difficulty. No one can play on the hardest difficulty. Everyone's trying, but they can't. It's currently not in that case. Like, 30 difficulties, arbitrary number, 30 difficulties in the game, and can't get anywhere near, like, 25 plus, right? The best players can't get 25 plus. It's not currently in the game. But the end case here, though, is if everyone's grouped around each other, they think one difficulty, why should other people get to play on it, but I can't? It's only one number, right? And it's not even necessarily about the difficulty increase as much as it's about the fact the numbers are too close together. And it could even be just fucking arbitrary. It really doesn't matter. But instead, we have now, they're going to rework the chargers. And the chargers right now, I don't think there's anything wrong with them. They're hard. Like the fucking... the spore charger, the poo-poo charger, the fucking sometimes very difficult to deal with simply because you can't fucking see it. Very fucking annoying. Is it like the end of the game, like I can't do anything about it? No. Is it something you have to worry about? Yeah. Is that a good thing? Yeah, if the game's trying to be difficult. But instead now we're going to get them reworking the difficulty and reworking chargers again. So do you think reworking chargers means they're going to keep the difficulty the same? My guess is no. They're going to make it easy mode, which already happened. The 2 months after Meridia, the game was easy mode. And I spent nearly, like I said at the beginning of the stream, guys, the 3 indicators you can use right out of the gates, just right out of the bat, is the number of reinforcements left, the number of the map, the amount of the maps that's clear, and then the amount of time that is left. And prior to the recent patch, you'd have 3 reinforcements gone, all map clear, and then 25% of the time left, maybe even more, 30% of the time left. Does that sound hard? No, that is not, at no point there, because you have to start making concessions with map clear if you're running out of lives and if you're running out of time, right? These actually start really mattering. You come down to the wire, you got to make concessions on map clear. You 100% need to make concessions on map clear. When people are full clearing and have a bunch of spades of everything left, that means they aren't using their resources. It's a very basic rule of thumb that you can utilize to figure out whether or not the game is hard or not. And for some reason, people just never noticed it. It's just there and they just don't notice it. So reworking chargers, this is the first sign that this potentially could be a problem, is reworking chargers here. Moving on.
Additionally, from a bigger picture perspective, we will be exploring creation of an opt-in beta test environment to improve our testing processes, and we consider this a high priority.
So, originally they mentioned a PTR. I nuanced that, or I asterisked that and said I liked what they did originally in the game, whether or not it's cheaters doing it or not, in which basically people randomly got chosen to beta test stuff, right? Like vehicles and just random shit. Having that done in the game itself not only guarantees that you get analytics with, assuming they collect analytics, not only does it guarantee analytics and playtest data, but at the same time you can actually get the word from the person's mouth itself, and you can not deal with all this shit right here that, honestly, we talked about it last night, it seems an awful lot like some of these players might not even fucking be playing the game anymore, to be perfectly honest. I think a lot of people that are trying to weigh in don't even play the game, and they just parrot what they hear. And that's actually pretty fucking terrible. Or they play on like Diff 5 or something, which, it's not to completely disregard the Diff 5 players, feedback, but being able to see that that person's feedback is from Diff 5 would be very telling. Once again, this is like Overwatch, where you have plat players telling the GM and top 500 players how to play the game when they barely understand or don't even understand the game itself. It's a Dunning-Kruger. It's a Dunning-Kruger like this, where they don't even know that they're bad because they haven't even gotten that far into the game where they actually realize what they need to do to be good. And then you end up with things like the charger rework, which sounds an awful lot like charger nerfs to me, which they've already done. A lot of people on Reddit have admitted they don't even play months. Yeah, if you get it really drilled down to it, that takes too long to fucking realize it. You need like the nitty gritty, just rip it out of them sort of shit, where you figure out they are actually a fucking Diff 5 player or they haven't played in forever. And you can do that with in-game beta testing. We talked about this a couple different times. Overwatch has instituted such things in the past. I think they call it experimental or mode or whatever. The problem with the PTR is the fact that it is a limited run. There's only going to be a handful of players that will install the PTR, and then these players seem to think that they will be much, like their input is much more important than everyone else's. So you end up with a very select group of individuals that usually just fuck around, by the way, As is the case with Overwatch when they do the PTB or whatever they call it. And it's just for a new hero. All you got was basically, you couldn't even take the data because the games wouldn't even be legit. You get the one guy playing the new unit, and then everyone else just fucks around because it's a beta. And it leads to some really, really weird and skewed data collection. If it's in a live test environment, you immediately get analytics, you can immediately tell who's playing it, and then at the same time, you can ask for feedback. Like I said, keep it simple, 5 questions, maybe a little fill in the blank, 100, whatever Twitter is for character limits, 400 characters of, optional. Otherwise, five radial buttons, click whatever you think. If it's too much, people won't do it. It has to be just, I talked before about when I was in uni and doing psychology, a lot of data collection actually revolves around making sure people have they give you answers that freely. If it becomes too complicated, it leads to people just pushing random buttons. If they're giving a reward at the end, it leads to people just pushing buttons for the reward. Remember, we're talking about the monkeys slamming the button for the reward? It turns out people just pushing the buttons for the reward. But 5 questions easily just pops up and a fill in the blank. An optional fill in the blank of just what else do you think would be useful after trying this, right? And then if it's opt-in, once again, in-game, you just have a checkbox somewhere where someone says, would you like to test the experimental features and possibly randomly queue into an experimental feature game, right? Instantly, you have your beta testers without actually having this. This is something you want to avoid. This shit right here is even when it's clearly a work in progress because people don't really understand game design or game development where everything's going to be iteration upon iteration upon iteration. It's not always going to be right. It'll change, and what matters is really what comes after the change. This right down here is literally just people just explode at the simplest thing. It doesn't even matter. They're just a bunch of Karens. But if it's in-game data collection, it's pretty easy to do, right? I'm looking at buying a home safe. You wouldn't believe how deep you can get them into buying home safes. They actually make rooms. I mean, you could just make a room that's a safe, and I guess the end game is just a safe room, right? What happens if you take the word home safe and turn it around? A safe home? Safe home room? Yeah. A room in your house that's safe, as it turns out. Yeah. Either way. This random segue there, but yeah.
Post regular player surveys to gather more insights and feedback from the community.
Once again, they currently do this on Discord, which is a good stopgap, and it's pretty easy for them to implement and do. Doing this in game and collecting analytics is what you want. You want to be able to collect those analytics and figure out what exactly kind of player is telling you all of a sudden that Chargers are hard work, right? I don't think they have really many analytics. Proof in the pudding is Shams, where he is talking about, we talked about this, where Shams mentioned 30% of the player base was using the Incinerator, and it seemed like a couple things might be wrong with that stat. One is when I played, it seemed like anywhere from 2 to 3 people in my lobby, not including me because I'm an outlier, were using the Incinerator, so possibly as close to 90-70% of the players on Diff 9 part of the patch were using the Incinerator on bugs. So a couple things here is he didn't note the difficulty level they're pulling from, and he also didn't notably mention bugs. So it could be the overall, that's all the stats they have, is just the overall player base, Diff 1 through 9, 30% of them are using the Incinerator, which, no one's going to be using it really. I mean, I guess I have seen people try to use it against bots, but that's not really what people use it for and why it was kind of meta, right? So, yeah, they actually have to work on their analytics, and kind of goes hand in hand with the whole section here we haven't added yet, and I still really need to add, which is maybe they should actually consider ditching their piece of shit engine before it gets too completely out of control. Because if they aren't gathering stats right now, and it's actually really hard for them to gather a lot of stats, that's kind of a problem. That's actually a problem because they actually need stats to figure out what's going on, especially if Shams mentioned their developers might not be playing, he didn't say what skill level they're at, but they aren't at the skill level. He was very vague about that, but they might not even be able to play the game on harder difficulties, and they need stats to help them figure it out. Not that stats are the end-all be-all answer, mind you, but they're very important, especially when your developers don't have experience. That being said, you should already have a playtest team. I'm still questioning why they don't have 4 Swedish guys or four Swedish teenagers that literally just, they're doing this as, intern or something. I don't know why they don't have QA testers. They just hire 4 guys that pay minimum wage to play test their game that are good. assumingly they're actually good. They have to be good, right? There's like the one qualification is you have to be good at games and able to think in a logical, thought out manner. Bug hunting, as well as being able to test stuff and give feedback, and actually give in-house feedback that's not biased. And then you have to keep them away from social media too, I guess, because they're gonna pick up on the poo-poo scent, and then people love grouping up together, guys, and shitting on something, and it really doesn't matter what it is and how it's shitting on something, but just shitting on it. And you could end up with a tainted pool of individuals that are trying to sabotage the game based on what they hear on social media. Fucking hilarious. Either way, surveys are important, but I would say they should 100% add them in game so that they can gather analytics in the game. And I mean, if it's some sort of privacy concern, just say you can't give a survey unless you allow analytics. So your opinion doesn't matter unless you can legit actually give your analytics. I'm sorry you have to drop the curtain, but you do.
Improve our process for patch, release notes, providing more context and reasoning behind changes.
As we talked about before, these two are kind of hand in hand here, so we'll cover both these at the same time.
More blog posts and streams where we expand on these topics for those interested.
So, I mentioned this before, and I'm not completely against the developers actually, talking about stuff. You have to realize a lot of people won't agree, even if they mention their reasoning behind it. They aren't going to agree, and then they're going to start frisking. They're going to start tearing apart line by line, going through line by line, and trying to basically just attack every single area and aspect of it. I don't think developers are playing God, and I don't think they actually need to completely rationalize every decision to everyone, no matter what. That being said, they have to at least be able to rationalize it to themselves. So I don't think they need to they don't need to tell the army of Karens how and why they're doing something. But at the end of the day, in their mind, they need to be able to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And I think I'm pretty well thought out, and I flesh out every idea pretty extensively, and I give reasoning, rationale, and even examples and other industry case uses of why this is a good idea, right? This, while it might seem like, oh, it's just enemy fatalities on players, that's been done in Mortal Kombat, wow, that's so amazing. There's also a lot more rationale that goes into it and why it would actually mesh with, Helldivers 2. And that's why we're on the Better Divers Guide, right? That's why there we have the Better Divers Guide. Because a lot of these are things that could actually help the game, even if they aren't silver bullets, and maybe they aren't all good ideas. But a lot of the stuff in here has reasoning, rationale, examples, everything you can think of for addressing the point. What happens, though, well, I don't think they need to rationalize and prostrate themselves in front of Karens. They need to be able to figure it out on their own. And maybe this is why this is here, because, maybe Shams told them they have to, why did you do it? And they get a shoulder shrug. Maybe there needs to be more going on there, and it's actually kind of curious how someone gets in a position where they can shoulder shrug on important decisions, and that's actually an okay response. But that's where we're at right now, and you can kind of tell that there is some shoulder shrugging based on some of the questionable changes they've made in. Once again, I don't want to make this game easy because Helldivers should be Helldivers, but some of the changes, like with the Dominator and the Slugger being the most obvious one, is just I think they were trying to maybe address the idea of gun differentiation, but didn't change it at all because they're both shotguns and they're both relatively the same. They both shoot slugs, but we discussed specialized ways that you could even deal with the Dominator and make it into a specialized weapon, because the way the Dominator works is specialized in and of itself because it's based on the jet pistol, which is actually a real life. What is it called? The jet gun, jet pistol. It's actually a real life thing we talked about before. It's actually a pretty cool gun. Whether or not it's actually true or they just saw some bullshit somewhere, I don't know. Either way, the inspiration is actually a thing in real life, which is the jet pistol or jet guns would actually have ammo that were rockets. Maybe it was rocket pistol that were rockets. So instead of a casing and a bullet on the front of the casing, the primer is lit. The gunpowder ignites and pushes the projectile down the tube for a gun barrel, and the expansion of your gases here is what causes it to propel forward. After it leaves the barrel, it basically maximizes its feet per second. It maximizes its max speed, and then it drops off after that. The difference is if you have the rocket pistol, when it ignites it, the powder is in the shell itself. The powder is in the bullet. And that means when it leaves the gun itself is just for aiming. When it leaves the gun, after it starts, gets a spin on it, after it leaves the rifle and it leaves the barrel, it continues to accelerate for a little bit because it's burning off, it's like a missile, it's burning off the energy behind the bullet, which is actually really, really fucking cool. So if we go here and we reference the Better Diver's Guide, because I'm fucking amazing, we go here and we reference the Better Diver's Guide and we talk about the most basic level of gun development for gun differentiation. You have normal looking curves here for weapons of distance of damage fall off over distance, right? In the case of a jet pistol, it would be a weird thing where the damage would actually start out very low and then would accelerate. Obviously, you could use a more accentuated version of that, right? It actually does a lot more damage further away. It's actually a really cool concept for a gun, so closer you are to enemies, the less damage you actually do, because it doesn't have room for the bullet to accelerate. So it'd actually be pretty fucking cool. But they didn't do that, right? It's just another shotgun. So, like, at the very least, you can come up with rationale and reasoning inside your mind on why some of these things are working the way that they do, and then come up with ways of balancing. But as I mentioned before, like, if the developers themselves can't even figure out why they're doing stuff, that's probably a problem, more so than explaining it to everyone else. The peanut gallery, myself included, doesn't really need to know. It's helpful, and I think people really like when people explain stuff, even though they honestly don't. They'll just say it's nice, and then they don't care. They care about what actually happens, by the way. Some people really, 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 really like that shit, and I don't think it's necessary, but, it's good that maybe at the end of the day that what's actually being forced here is for the developers to internally, not even among their peers, but to themselves, figure out why they're doing what the fuck they're doing to the guns and everything in the game. Why you're doing what you're doing. Use your words, use your thoughts. Even if you don't have the inside voice, write down in your journal why you decided to change that. There's some people, by the way, that don't have an inside voice, which is actually, I find, very, very weird. I still remember hearing about that like 5 years ago, and I still thought, it just blew my mind. I thought everyone has an inside voice where they can sit there and inside their head. But as it turns out, that's not actually true. So I don't know exactly how these people work, but at the very basic level, when I was back in grade school, I remember we had to do journals, and it never actually, I didn't understand why we did journals, because everything that I was doing in a journal, I just did in my head. It made absolutely no sense to me. And it also felt very intrusive, by the way. But besides doing that, I had to write journals in second grade or something like that. I was like, why? Why would you even do this? This doesn't make any sense. As it turns out, there's actually some people that need to do that. But right here, I think the important takeaway here isn't even rationalizing to the Karens or the peanut gallery. Rather, it is, if you are a developer, you need to be able to figure out for yourself why you're doing something. I don't even know why I have to say this. If you are someone that's in charge of a decision, maybe have a reason for why you're doing something. I mean, sometimes it can just be random, doing something random, quirky, especially if being creative, applying limitations to yourself when you're trying, edging on that side of creativity, obviously, is you do the limitations afterwards, assuming you're not hurting anyone or anything or whatever, right? But trying to figure things out first or after you actually do them is also sometimes important for, getting the creative juices flowing, so to speak. Because if you automatically limit yourself, you're not going to be able to come up with anything new or interesting. It's going to be the same shit that another game's done. They're going to rationalize through numbers somewhere. That's also not good. But this is actually incredibly important, which is rationalizing what you're doing to even yourself. Even not your peers, just to yourself internally. You need to be able to come up with why, how, and what you're doing, right? So, yeah. That's a good thing, by the way. Once again, I don't think this needs you. And as I mentioned before, I do think that there needs to be a buffer layer here. Usually your CSRs or your community managers, there's all sorts of people, they need to churn through the shit. So if they do live streams, taking questions from the audience through a buffer isn't a bad idea. And you'll see most of those live streams have hosts, right, that read the comments, right? And then pick out one that they want to tell to the team that's sitting there. Because it turns out, once again, we talked about this a couple different times. I'm pretty sure their private Slack development, their Discord is the same one as the public one, and all the developers are sitting there in that Discord where people are just literally just pumping vitriol through the channels, and they're someone's just bored one day and they're like, I don't really feel like coding right now. I'm just sitting here sipping my coffee. looking through the work channels right now here, and then I see this other one light up here, and I'm like, I'm kind of bored right now. What is it? And then you click on it, and you're like, what are these guys talking about? No, that's not right at all. What is going on here? And then all of a sudden you end up in an argument, or you end up pissed off, or it ruins your flow, and then all of a sudden it's just fucked up. It actually blows my mind, but I'm pretty sure it's true that their private Discord, I'm very certain, is their public Discord, which is what they use for work. And that absolutely has to fucking harm their workflow. Just absolutely, just like morale, workflow, everything. Like, that needs to be segmented off. I don't know why that's the case. It probably got grandfathered in from HD1 where it wasn't such a big deal, and it probably was pretty controllable. That Discord is absolutely out of control, guys. There's like I don't even want to step foot in there. It is just like a pool. It's just a pool of stuff everywhere, and just anything of value gets lost, and stuff that raises a lot of ruckus. Obviously, the mods are just going to hammer down on it right away, and I don't even want to be part of that bureaucracy. That's just not my thing. But my guess is their developers are basically in there, and they're stuck in there. And Joel's you may have made a video seeming that Joel is this headless entity, but as it turns out, Joel is actually Discord. Yeah, Joel is Discord, as it turns out. It is the headless, bodiless entity that is Discord. But anyways, let's see. Friends love to shit on Taylor Swift, yet they can play the guitar, play singing better than all of them. Yeah, I mean, yeah. People can have preferences too, right? Yep, and Odie just said what I said. Yes, I agree. Yep, that's what I said with my words. Yes, that's correct. But changing for themselves or the community, I don't think that has anything to do with what's going. The intention. If you're just making a product to make people happy, we talked earlier about slamming the button and getting the treat, and that's basically where a lot of people are. They aren't thinking any further ahead than win equal good, more win equal more good, and that's it. That's their thought process. They think that because they aren't winning, the game isn't fun anymore. But Dark Souls is a bunch of losses before you win. It really, really, really depends on the game itself and what the game is setting out to be. And a lot of people slam the treat button, and if they aren't getting treats fast enough, then for them that's bad. And that's all it is. It's just a lot of people are very, 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 very simple when it comes to logic. And they literally just know that winning makes them feel good, therefore if they win a lot, it's going to be better. And that's, then there's no challenge. You like drop everyone to Diff 1 and people walk around on a field trip and they win. So is that good balance? I would say no. Maybe just for Diff 1, but that's why there's 9 other difficulties in the game. I don't know. I don't know how their hierarchy works in their game. I don't know if they've ever actually explained it anywhere. I've not went anywhere to look it up, and that's one of the reasons I just refer to everyone there as Joel. Because I'm not trying to address them personally. I think they're all kind of responsible for what goes on there to a certain extent. Okay. Interesting. We are not covering the comments section here. I don't care about the peanut gallery or what they're talking about. There's going to be a bunch of back rubbing and applauding each other, which is the same thing happened after the Sony controversy. Yet after the Sony controversy, there's just a bunch of people there's still people complaining about the 170 countries that can't buy the game, and a lot of people that are saying that those people that did buy the game can't play it, which is completely untrue. This everything below here on this post doesn't actually matter to me. Normally we go through this. All it is going to be just back rubbing and applauding each other, and thinking that they won a crusade again, which is what they're really looking for. Let's see.